get started? Okay. Hi everybody, I'm Rob Bowen. I'm the director of our production, the drama department's production of The Persecution and Assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, as performed by the inmates of the asylum at Charenton under the direction of the Marquis de Sade. Called Marat Sade for short, okay? And what I'm going to talk about today is basically the process that we went to in producing this show, which is a show that doesn't get produced very often. Well, I'll talk about it in the history of it as well in just a minute. I've been wanting to direct this show for a long, long time. In fact, I was intrigued with it as an undergraduate at the University of Southern Colorado back in the about 74, 75 is when I first heard about it, and thought, this is a really interesting play. And being written in the 60s, it spoke to me. I was probably too young to be a participant of the 60s as much as I was just a result of the 60s. I mean, it had a great deal of influence on me. I had a desire to direct the show in 2006. Now, our department goes through a process of what we have to do for our students, because obviously we're here for them first, and the needs of the department come first. In 2006, we had a pretty good crop of students that really had a desire to do a musical. And I proposed Marat Sade with the caveat that it's not a musical. It's not a musical in the traditional sense. In the traditional sense, a musical will go ahead and we'll go ahead and have the principals that sing, and in the music you have something that moves the story along or actually helps with the development of the character. In this case, the principals don't sing primarily. We do have two major characters that do sing, Duperret and Corday. But we have mostly four singers and an ensemble that do most of the singing for it. And what they do when they sing is really more commentary about the show than telling the plot, moving it along. So I proposed it. And it got shot down to cabaret, which was okay. In retrospect, that was quite fine. I tried it again in 2014, and actually we had announced it in the season that we were going to produce it. And something happened during the summer. I'd already started my research on it, and it got pulled. So we ended up not doing it that time, and it just came around this time. In 2016, I just felt that the time was absolutely right, that if I ever was going to do it, it would be now. It was a show on my bucket list, and the political situation that the country finds itself in just seemed apropos for this particular show. Why this show now? Well, it allowed our students to participate in a challenging theater piece that could meet the needs of a musical piece without being a traditional musical, first of all. It certainly is a liberal arts piece in the fact that it brings together a spectrum of many, many disciplines. Besides drama, there's psychology involved with it, political science involved with it, history involved with it, social sciences involved with it, music involved with it. Whenever you do theater, there is a certain amount of physics involved with it. The political landscape calls for it. There are many lines in the show that kind of reflect where we're at in this country. Some of them talk about torture. Some of them talk about wars and being tired of paying for them, and there are profiteers involved with it. Some of them talk about the disparity of wealth that is going on in the country. It just seemed right for this particular time. And you have to remember, when we decided this, we didn't know who our political candidates were going to be at that time. All right. It was originally written in 1963 by Peter Weiss and produced by the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1964. It was then went on in 1965 to Broadway and ran 145 performances, capturing Tony Awards for Best Play and Best Direction for Peter Brooks. It was revived by the National Theatre in England, I think in 2012. And I read some of the reviews about it. It was even more intense than what they did originally, and they had numbers of 20 to 30 not students, but patrons leaving for each performance. And that just tells you where we have gotten with our technology. We can make violence even better. In 1967, it was adapted to a film version, which is still available. It was done with the original cast. Had Glenda Jackson in it and Patrick Macnee, and it was all shot in one day, which is unheard of today. You know, it was written by Weiss in response to the political turmoil of the early '60s that many Western countries were experiencing, and I think we find ourselves in that same kind of political turmoil now, and. We don't know whether the election is going to end up being the end of this or whether it's going to continue, which is kind of what the play is about as well. Okay, and that's what basically makes it relevant to our times. What did I want to accomplish with this show? Themes. There are basic themes in the show regarding revolution. Where does it begin? Where does it end? Does it have to be violent? Some of the questions that are asked by Sade, and his argument is that revolution has to begin within oneself. Marat, on the other hand, thinks that revolution has to tear down the old and start fresh, even though he distinctly says that we started the revolution, but we don't know how to run it. Certainly the themes about revolution. I think one of the more important things to me is at the end of the show when there's a great turmoil that's going on, and I don't want to ruin the end for anybody who's going to go see the show, so I'm not going to say too much. But one of the characters, Jacques Roux, who is a disciple of Marat, says these lines: "When will you learn to see? When will you learn to take sides?" And what it is a call for the audience to become involved in their political situation. And I think that is one of the things that I wanted to accomplish with the show, is to inspire the audience to take up a position. And if there's anything that we do in the liberal arts education, it's to ask you to take a side, make a decision, make a value statement, but be able to support it, not just take it for its own sake. And I think that's really an important aspect. The process begins, my process. In April, I began a fresh analysis of the play, and we secured the rights to the script, but not the music. The music for the play is different royalty than it is for the play. And because of this, I actually thought, oh, wow, this is an opportunity. Because as much as I like the play, the music to me is extremely dated. It seems like the music is very much set in the 60s. It's not timeless, and it's certainly, I had the feeling that if we did that with that music, we would be just trying to copy the show that Peter Brooks did, and I didn't want to do that. I did purchase the vinyl original soundtrack for the film, and I listened to the music quite a bit and digitized it, and at that point I decided that I needed a different option for it. And that's when, well, I'll get to that in a second. I also wanted the production to challenge the audience as well as the performers. If anybody knows the shows that I've done in the past here at UNCA, you'll know that my plays are a little off the beaten track. They're not the normal shows. They're about Columbinus or Urinetown, Dystopian Society, Assassins. So they're a little weird. I wanted to challenge the audience, give them a stake in the show, the performers as well. I want the show to lend itself to ideas as the audience is reflected about the play within a play. The audience is very much a part of this show. They are called into the asylum of Charenton to be an audience to watch the inmates perform the play. So right off the bat, as soon as they come in, there is a dynamic change, which is really, really important. In order to achieve these goals, I needed to expand my pool of available resources in order to achieve my goals. What that meant is I need people to help me do this, okay? And I couldn't do it all myself. I had to put together a pretty good creative team. I had a dilemma right off the bat about the audience as a passive voyeur or an engaged participant. Many times in theater, the audience assumes the role of the fourth wall. And what I mean by that is we're just looking in on somebody else's story. We aren't participants. This is really amplified in the ideas that when you go to see a movie, you are as passive as it gets. There is nothing that you do or say that's going to change that outcome or how that is performed. It is always the same every time. And that's one of the magics of theater, is that how an audience reacts affects the performance. No performance is ever the same because of an audience. And when you do that, that's just live theater as a whole. But what if I wanted to engage the audience in other ways? Make them active participants, whether they want to be or not. And that was my ethical dilemma. I finally resolved it by the fact that if we put up enough warnings about trigger warnings and stuff, and go ahead and say that if you bought a ticket, you have bought into this show. If you have bought a ticket and decided to come, you have made a commitment to be an audience member, and that means you are going to be engaged, whether you want to be or not. Okay. Yeah, historically, audiences have always been an active part in productions up until Wagner. Wagner turned off the lights and said the show's more important than the audience. Up until that time. Up until that time, the lights were always up in the audience, and the audience reacted, and the performers would perform, would actually banter with the audience many times. It's well noted in Shakespearean times that they would banter with the groundlings. So I said already about buying the tickets. You become a stakeholder. Okay. Starting out. Okay. Began discussions with Rob Burrows, the scenic designer, in establishing the audience-actor relationship as well as the relationships to the other characters. Carol Belk Theater, and I'm going to show this to you in just a minute, is a floor plan that is an arena, and we wanted to see how we could position the performers and the audience to best bridge what I call the aesthetic distance, which is the distance between the performer and the audience. The play takes place in an asylum bathhouse. What did we need? The audience has to come to witness this production. Our space is an arena. This is what it looks like. We're surrounded by 6 seating sections. We got an elliptical stage, which is 30 feet by 20 feet. Where would you put the orchestra? Seats in this section and are removable. This section and the seating is removable. What we came up with was this. We moved section 5, which was this section, split it in half and moved it over to join section 6. We built a walkway out with wood that became an extended platform. We took the stage completely out and dropped the stage 14 inches into a pit. We put bars around the stage. Since they're an asylum, we want to make sure that the audience is separated from them and they are safe when they first come into the theater. We have a center platform with the main bath, and we do use water. There is water in this show, and that's for Marat. We have platforms here, here, here. We have a moving bathtub. We have a platform from Colmier, who is the head of the director of the asylum, and his family. And then we have a staircase which goes up to a higher ledge, which I can't tell you why that's there. Okay. Just enough to say that Colmier represents the status quo, and that's not exactly something we want to keep in Revolution. Okay? The music. In May, I contacted the music department to see if there was anyone who might be interested in serving as a musical director and composing an original score for us, or composing an original score. I talked to Melody and Wayne Kirby, and they gave me the name of a person I really never had worked with or talked with before, Matthew Richmond, and we began a wonderful collaboration. He bought into the idea right away, and over the summer he went away, and I let him do his thing, and then I started to get a little nervous because I hadn't heard from him for a while. But he's as hard a worker as I know, and I've really come to really enjoy our collaboration together. And I'd like Matthew to talk a little bit about the music now.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, yeah, this has been an amazingly good collaboration. Really enjoyed every minute of it. And I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm just going to describe a few things, except that my notes are rerunning. So typically, as Rob was describing, a musical is very different from what this one is. This show has lyrics in the script, and it just says song, and then there's no music. So we wanted to create something that was, as he said, less of a particular time, more timeless. And wanted it to, one of my major goals was really for the music to help the audience understand what's going on, because the script is extremely dense, both with words and with ideas. And I personally had a hard time deciphering it. I was not familiar with the show. And after watching the film version once and then reading the score several times, I was only starting to really understand what was going on. So I wanted the music to really help the audience follow along and get the ideas. That said, we had an awful lot of challenges in that there's a very short time frame. Typically, if you're writing a musical from scratch, you might take a year at least, or more to really put it together. We had a couple months. I had no idea what quality of singers I was going to have, so I had to make this pretty accessible to everybody. And to be blunt, the lyrics aren't that great as song lyrics. They're great as text in a play. But some of them work really well, but some of them have like really unpredictable rhythms. Some lines rhyme, other ones don't. They jump from idea to idea to idea. They're clearly written by someone who doesn't write songs. So getting that to work in a way that felt accessible and felt natural was one of the big challenges. And I want to show you just a quick example of one of the songs, the contrast between the original music from the 1960s production and what we're doing in our production. This is a song called "Those Fat Monkeys," which is after there's been a long, is this after? Yeah, there's been a long discussion between Marat and Sade about what revolution is and what it means to be engaged or not engaged. And a little bit after that, we started getting reactions from the other characters about all of that that's been said. And this song is basically just saying how selfish and horrible the rich people are. So the lyrics, I'm just going to play you the first verse out of 3. The lyrics are, "Those fat monkeys covered in banknotes have champagne and brandy on tap. They're up to their eyeballs in franc notes. We're up to our noses in crap." Which is one of the better lyrics, I think. I like this one. This one lends itself to singing pretty well. So the 60s version sounded like this, and I'm not a singer, so please don't judge me by my singing voice. It went, "Those fat monkeys covered in banknotes have champagne and brandy on tap. They're up to their eyeballs in franc notes. We're up to our noses in crap." That's a very 1960s style song, and if you know like early Andrew Lloyd Webber or anything like that, he wrote a lot of stuff that feels that way, 60s and 70s. More importantly to me, though, is it doesn't feel natural. That's not the way you would say those words. If you're going to say, "We're up to our noses in crap," you wouldn't say, "We're up to our noses in crap." That's very artificial. So I wanted something that felt more timeless and presented the text in a more intelligible fashion. So I turned it into a waltz. There are a lot of waltzes in the show, which is appropriate for the time period and the setting. It's got like this. "Those fat monkeys covered in banknotes have champagne and brandy on tap. They're up to their eyeballs in franc notes. We're up to our noses in crap." Right? Which, at least to my ear, is a much more natural way to say those, and it's something you could get stuck in your head. Whereas the other one is very unpredictable and kind of doesn't make the point in the same way, in my opinion. Talked about the lyrics. A couple of other interesting things with the lyrics. There's one song near the end called 15 Glorious Years that I'm not going to play for you, but it takes up, like 3 or 4 pages of the script because it's telling the history of the time period between when the play within the play is set in 1793 and when the bookend play is set in 1808. It's going through the entire political history of those 15 years in 12 verses and 3 choruses. And 12 verses of the same music is a lot, and it's just full of words that come flying by. And that was a big challenge because we've also got the actors acting out everything they're singing about. And fitting all that in was fun, but I think it worked out really well. I want to show you one other example real quick of a place where the density of the lyrics is used to a good effect, which is a song called "One Day It Will Come to Pass," where we have our 2 main characters, and one of them, Corday, the female lead, sings, "One day it will come to pass, man will live in harmony with himself and with his fellow man." And then Duperret, who is trying to get in her pants the whole time and wants to impress her and force not only his physical self but his ideas on her, responds this way. "One day it will come to pass, a society which will pull its energies to defend and protect each person for the benefit of each person, and in which each individual, although united with all the others, only obeys himself and so stays free." I like that one. I think that one's a lot of fun. Let me see. So we ended up, the show has 19 songs, and I understand Rob's reasons for not wanting to call this a musical, but I think 19 songs is somewhere over the threshold of this is a musical, but certainly not a traditional one. I wrote them on 11 different musical themes so that the themes can be used again to help connect parts of the story. Whereas the original music did a little bit of that, but very little. Pretty much every song was different, but our music recurs with different words in order to tie things together. There's a lot of places in the script that are marked for incidental music, background music, that we took out because A, it felt unnatural, and B, it's really hard to hear actors in that room speaking over music. So that was mostly a practical thing. And then the last thing I'll mention is our instrumentation. The script actually specifies that the musicians should have harmonium, lute, flute, trumpet, and drums. And a harmonium is a reed organ, usually a little tabletop thing with a bellows that you pump and you play a keyboard. And it sounds a little bit like a harmonica or an accordion because it has a similar reed system inside. But what I managed to get my hands on was an antique pump organ, which is large like this, and originally you would pump it with pedals to pump the air through it, and it has a keyboard you play like a normal organ, and it has that reedy, very old, sort of creepy sound. Ours is running on a motor instead of the pump pedals because whoever owned it before did that to it, but it works well for us. And then we've got acoustic guitar, acoustic bass, piano, and a clarinet to round things out. And I think it's a really good sound, really represents the time period well, I believe. And I think that's about all I need to say, unless you have something else you think I should point out.
No, I think that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Like I say, Matthew Richmond came to my rescue, and we got to work on that aspect of the show. It is not a traditional musical, and don't think that it's Les Mis.
No.
Les Mis actually happens 4 years after the show, after this takes place. Les Mis is not about the French Revolution. It's a uprising after the French Revolution. I also was challenged as I needed someone to help with the movement of the actors. The movement needs to be on normal blocking, which is how you position actors for visual pictures. I didn't necessarily want choreography because I didn't think of it as a musical in that sense. So I needed somebody that could help us with take a look at it. And Connie Schrader, who has been used to be with Health and Fitness and was former director of the dance program here. She had done work with us before. I contacted her, and she was very excited to jump back in, and she helped a lot with the movement. She did end up having to choreograph one number, really. She helped with movement on everything, but 15 Glorious Years is choreographed because it is a long song. So over the summer, I began researching more about the French Revolution, Marat, Sade, Corday, the things that you have to think about. I did a lot of research on Corday. She was executed 3 days after she murdered or assassinated Marat. And there was lots of descriptions about her execution, to the fact that her head was, after you sever a head with a guillotine, you've got between 4 and 7 seconds of consciousness still. And the descriptions of it were that after somebody is executed, usually the executioner will hold their head up to the crowd. And in this particular case, the executioner was a disciple of Marat and slapped Corday's face, and she gave him a look of disdain, as it was described. This caused such an uproar that the executioner was imprisoned for like 4 weeks because of it. Because other things about the French Revolution, I didn't realize. I mean, I knew a little bit about it, but not to the extent that we went through. It was one of the bloodiest revolutions in history. There were 4,000 people executed, not to mention the people who were killed, starved to death during the process. Those are 4,000 people just executed by the existing governments. And most of the people who started the revolution were executed. Marat was put on trial to be executed and was able to save himself just at the trial. I like to work from a visual point of view, otherwise I'd be in radio, okay? It's theater. So I gather a lot of imagery, which speaks to me, and sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't, and that's an important aspect to me. And I created a different PowerPoint here, and see if I can get to it. These are images that meant something to me, and these are things I share with the other designers because I'm not sure what it means when I first get them, but there's something that sings to me about it. And it's a process. It's similar. It's kind of like the process that Robert Wilson and a lot of other directors go through as well. Obviously, 1789. Here we're talking about the Revolution. Okay, so we got flags material. You know, this looks like Les Mis, but it's not. Okay. So violence is what this one says to me. The Marquis de Sade. This is where sadism comes from, and it comes from his name, and the idea of the things that what he did. He was a political prisoner. He wasn't insane. His family had money, and he wrote a lot of treatises on the political system. He was arrested because of one particular episode in Paris that was very embarrassing to the government, in which he crucified prostitutes upside down, and it got publicized, and he was imprisoned. And he was even in the Bastille, as we pronounce it, but Bastille in French, and was there 2 days before the uprising, where the peasants revolted and took the Bastille, which is Bastille Day, which they celebrate still. And he was sent to the asylum of Charenton, where he actually did write plays. And they were produced there. And in chronological history, he actually died like 3 weeks after this particular play that he wrote was produced. So there's a lot of interesting historical facts within the play as well that we discovered. This is one of the prints that I found of Corday being taken to her execution. We found a lot of things about Corday that was really interesting. The society at that time could not believe that a woman could do this by herself, that a woman could assassinate a political figure by herself. So she obviously had an accomplice. And they did an autopsy on her after she was executed to determine whether she was a virgin or not, to find out if she had a lover who helped her, hence the character of Duperrey. I look at other productions as well. That one didn't particularly mean anything to me other than the fact that it reminded me that I had to get started on publicity too. Okay. Sketches, hands, the knife, the bandages on top of Marat's head. That's an actual painting of Charlotte Corday. They even painted her when she was in prison for the 3 days before she was executed. And we'll show you that in a second. I believe this is the execution of Robespierre. And those are big things when they have the executions. This is one that we used in the poster eventually. We kind of cropped it and tore it apart because I love the fact that here you've got everybody reaching out. Marat has been stabbed, and you've got Corday in the corner there. I'll talk about that in just a second as well. Another picture of the assassination. Another painting of Corday being defiant with a guillotine. There's a picture of her in prison being about to be taken out. A bloody hand just seemed interesting to me. Spatters of blood, interesting to me. We stage an execution, a couple of executions in the play. Being let out again. This was a great visual about what the causes of the French Revolution were. And there's a picture of the guy painting the painting of Charlotte Corday. No, you know, it's like social media today. You know, everybody's got a phone and a camera. You know? That is the most famous painting by David. And the note states, because I have a need, something like that. Because I'm in need, you have to help me. There's the note there. That's the execution of Louis the 15th, 14th, one of them, the king at that time. Close-up view. Another execution. Guillotines were used up through the last time it was used was in the 1950s, actually, in South Africa. It's the history of the guillotine. I mean, there's still one on display in Scotland. They revolutionized how executions were done throughout Europe. They never picked up steam in the United States, so to speak. But prior to this, beheadings were done with either a sword or an axe, and many times they were not clean deaths, and it was very painful as they would have to hack through them several times. The guillotine was then invented, and it became a quick and efficient means of killing people. Another one, lots of pictures of guillotines. This picture is a huddled children in a pit. And the bars became very interesting to me, and I like the fact that they were down below, and this is kind of what helped us talk about influences on how the set was designed and things. Revolutions aren't necessarily always violent ones. The Industrial Revolution was kind of important too. Other productions again. A painting of the Marquis de Sade. I like this one because it kind of amplifies a bit of the makeup design that we ended up using in this particular show, which is very commedia-like. This is what we did with the poster. We tore it apart, and I caught a lot of flack for this for this particular idea of breaking it apart like this, because it breaks all the traditional aspects of how the visuals for marketing is supposed to be done, and students gave me a lot of grief about this. And I said, but this is an unconventional show. It's okay. It caught your attention, didn't it? And I had a student that actually designed something, and it was a good design. But I said, have you read the show? And she hadn't. So again, Industrial Revolution. Love this. This is more my philosophy. Kind of Beatles Revolution. Bloody Knife. Love this one. Che Guevara as Gandhi, or Gandhi as Che Guevara, which is more peaceful revolution. And of course, a really dramatic view of a guillotine. Another corday, another aspect of the revolution. Horses always look so noble in these. Another production. Okay, so those were images that were kind of important to me. Let's see. All right, how are we doing here? Okay. Created a director's book over the summer, which would have a floor plan in it, would have the script, have blocking, notations, audition sheets, the whole 9 yards. We refer to these things quite a bit. It's kind of like my Bible. It's a little different than a stage manager's book. Worked on a plan for publicity with Susie Morris using university resources and social media. In fact, I started on social media, I think, at the start of the semester, putting up pictures on Facebook of the posters and student designs as well, with a quote about revolution, a different one each day. And we've been doing this all the way through, and I'll finish up on Sunday. Apparently, a lot of people have things to say about revolution. We had auditions in August, in the first week of school. I had them all, I have people line up to take a look at different groupings of people. They essentially had to do a bit of a movement audition. They had about 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes, in order to read cold readings to me as a director, and then they got to sing with Matthew. And though between that short amount of time, is very much like it is professionally. You've got to move through and you've got to be able to make a mark. And I tell the students that they can come and see me after an audition to find out what they did right, what they did wrong. Why didn't I cast them? Sometimes it's just that they didn't fit in this particular cast. Sometimes it's the fact that they did not stand out. And what happens if somebody does something absolutely strange and different, they stand out, whether it's right or wrong, because that all automatically makes you want to direct them and see if you can get them back, and which means you spend more time with them. It's one of those little tricks that an actor needs to know how to do. But through this all, we ended up casting originally, I think, 24 people, and Matthew and Connie both had input into that cast. Then I had to go back to the department because we talk about who is cast, and then we have to divvy up the cast because there's another play later in the semester that has auditioned at the same time. We like to make sure that nobody is doing 2 shows in one semester because that's a huge workload, and they are students. So after we negotiated, we came down with a cast of about 23. Some were first choices, some were second choices, all were good choices. We had one person drop at some point. They didn't want to, but they had to because of time commitments. After the casting, we had our first read-through in Carol Belk Theater. They're not bored; they're just really intense. That was a week later after auditions were posted that we began to work with this group with the read-through. That first week was really important. We do table work, which was sitting down and going through the interpretations, the meanings of the show, what is happening at any particular time, what my vision is for the show at any particular time as the director. We also had some movement rehearsals. We brought in retired psychology professor Ann Weber, and she talked about what people might be like as far as what would get them committed for that time period. What kind of mental diseases would they have? Some would be political prisoners. How would they act? She was very helpful with that. We brought in Dr. Kathy Pons to help us in that first read-through with pronunciation of French words to make sure that we got all of that right. Our first musical rehearsal with Matthew. And that was kind of fun because some of these songs, actually, it's the first time I heard them with voices, and it was kind of fun. I did videotape a lot of them so I could take it back and incorporate that into movement that I was looking for doing with the actors during the songs. Okay, this next one is really 6 weeks of rehearsal, 99 hours just in rehearsal over those 6 weeks. That's a lot of time and a lot of commitment by these performers. The first week, read through, table work, movement work, intro to music. Second week, music work, block act 1, block act 2. Third week, off book already. That is really tough to do. Individual character and music work, we wanted to run act 1 already. Fourth week, run act 2, individual character work, music work, movement work, designer run through. That is where we bring in all the designers. It's primarily for lighting designers so they can see where the movement goes. In this particular case, it was beneficial that the person who was serving as the stage manager, Brian Marks, a student, and myself, we were co-lighting designers for the show, so it helped. And it made for a really good, easy tech rehearsal, knowing exactly what we were going to do. We also had a costume parade this week. So the actors get to try on their costumes for the first time. We get to look at them. We made some changes, quite a few changes actually after seeing this. The fifth week, we did movement, individual character work, and full runs. Sixth week, we had fall break. We had 4 days off, and it showed with our first run through after that they'd been away from it for 4 weeks, and it showed. We didn't take a big step backwards, but we didn't move forward. We did the next night. Friday night, we had a dry tech, which dry tech means that we have a technical rehearsal, cue to cue, lighting, sound cues, without the actors. We just want to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing. We have this big, marvelous cage that moves up and down, almost like an act curtain in Carol Bell Theater. It requires a lot of rigging and stuff, and it had to be safe. We needed to know when those moments happen in the show. However, the actors still needed to work, so many of them worked with doing line-throughs with one of the assistant stage managers, and those that weren't in the line-throughs were working with Matthew on music on that particular day. Saturday was wet tech that 6th week. Wet tech is when we do a technical rehearsal with the actors. Usually it's a cue to cue. We go from one cue to another. This show doesn't lend itself to that. Most cues will normally happen fairly fast. In this particular show, the first cue is 6 minutes long. So in order to do that, we said, let's just try and do a full run and try and stop as few times as we need to. And I think we stopped 6 times. We also did it with full music, which was really important because we wanted to, we had the orchestra already incorporated by then, but it was a good one to get as much work in as possible. And it was fairly efficient. We got done, I guess we actually started the rehearsal somewhere around 1:10, and we were out by 4:30, which was pretty efficient. 7th week, which is where we're at today. All right? We had a first dress on Sunday, a second dress on Monday, a third dress on Tuesday, and we previewed. And a preview is actually a 4th dress or final dress with an invited audience. And I don't know, we had 20 or 30 people there last night. Yeah. And I spend as much time watching the audience because as long as I've been doing theater, and I've been doing it since kindergarten, I still can't predict how an audience will react. And that's kind of your final judgment on your work, you know. And this is an extremely long first act and a fairly short second act. But it starts at 7:30, and we're usually out of there with intermission by 10:30 in that neighborhood. And not that many, we had a couple people who left because they wanted to see the presidential debates last night. But for the most part, everybody returned. Now, what was really, really interesting is there were reactions going on in the second act that showed that they were still intent throughout the entire show. They're not sure where to clap, which is really, really interesting. One of the things we did, when you do a curtain call occurs usually after the show. That's when the actors come out and take a bow. And that's for the audience to show their appreciation to the performers. In this case, we're not doing a curtain call. We're doing what's known as a tableau. The lights come down, and then they come back with the actors frozen in a particular scene. And it took a little while for the clapping to start, but I mean, when they left, when the lights came up, what was really apparent was nobody got up. They stayed in their chairs for a little while before they got up and left, which means they were engaged in the show, and that's really what we're looking for, that they are involved and committed to it as well. So I think we had a really good one, although they weren't the most reactive audience we've ever had. And I can't wait to see how it happens tonight and throughout the rest of the run. As I say, each audience is very different, so it'll be good to see how it all comes out. And that's a picture from last night's rehearsal last night. You can see the costumes are in there, the sets in there, the lights are in there. It's a unique production. It's not like anything we've ever done before here at Theater UNCA. It is very challenging production, and I'm very, very proud of the entire design team. Connie, myself, Rob Burles, Matthew are the only faculty that were in the creative team. The rest of the creative team were students. Brian Marks, we had student costume designer, a student makeup designer, a student sound designer. Pardon? Igor was a mentor. He was a mentor for the costume designer who was a student. So, and I think that's a great opportunity when we can get the students involved as much as possible. I hope you come see the show. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. Right on time.